Hello folks, we're going to have a look at this question. So evaluate Marxist views of the nuclear family in contemporary society. So let me go back to this again. It's got the word views. As soon as I see the word views, my instinct is to do a debate structure with three paragraphs against. So evaluate Marxist views of the nuclear family. And I think, well, this is a family question, and Marxism is in the theory grid. So it's in the blue theory grid is where they sit. So it'd probably be more appropriate to turn that into the same colour. So it's the blue theory grid. And the Marxists we have are Zaretsky in that grid. We've got family produces future workers, socialises us to see capitalism. So we've got Zaretsky is one Marxist. We've got Engels. It's how the ruling class maintain power. So it's how they stay powerful via inheritance. And then the only other one, if we've got Benyon, is a diversionary institution. Diversionary institution. And to be fair, while I'm thinking about it, we've got Cooper, haven't we? Is a dangerous socializing agent. So probably let's put Cooper in there as well. Dangerous socializing agent. So we've got 3 paragraphs, and it's ultimately going to end up with one person per paragraph, 2 in one and then another one. And then with other theories against. So we're going to go evaluate Marxist views of the family. So we're going to do, first of all, the family supports capitalism. So this paragraph is the family supports capitalism. For Zaretsky, it family produces future workers. Family produces future workers and is a unit of consumption. Family produces future workers and is a unit of consumption. So it maintains, also a unit of consumption, so it maintains an economic system that exploits. For Zaretsky, it socializes us to see capitalism as good or the only option. Now, I know I'm really going off into a little bit of education Marxism, but it's all relevant. And I'm going to add in Cooper, that for Cooper, the family is a dangerous socializing agent. Family is a dangerous socializing agent, as it teaches us to be obedient, teaches us to be obedient, teaches us, I think it teaches us blind obedience. Blind obedience. To authority. So we're going to do those 2, and they're really short, which is always a bit unnerving. So we're going to do those 2. Then we're going to do this shows. You can add any more detail if you've got it. But this shows Marxist views of the nuclear family. And I'm thinking, well, what's the this shows? It's asking me to evaluate, so give the strengths and weaknesses of Marxist views. Well, the strength is what they consider or what's useful. So this is one of those usefulness debates. So it shows that Marxist views of the nuclear family consider that the family maintains capitalism. So they consider that the family maintains capitalism. They consider that the nuclear family maintains capitalism by producing future workers, so it maintains capitalism by producing future workers and preventing a revolution. It maintains capitalism because it produces future workers and it preventing a revolution. As the family ensures we are obedient and therefore helps to reinforce that capitalism is good or the only option. So what it's considering us, Marxist views consider that the family maintains capitalism. It produces future workers and prevents a revolution as we blindly accept obedience, and it reinforces and it helps to reinforce that capitalism is good or the only option. So basically it's kind of three things. It produces workers and it prevents a revolution because we're blind to obedience, and it reinforces that it's good or the only option. However, so in evaluation, this gets really, really tricky in evaluation. So I only really have Christopher Larcher's evaluation in this grid. So I'm going to have to pull upon other areas of the Marxists across the sociology course. So I'm going to say, however, for Hall et al., these Marxists' views of the family don't consider that capitalism uses racism to disguise exploitation and create moral panics. So these Marxist views of the family don't consider that capitalism also uses racism to disguise exploitation and create moral panics. These Marxists are ethnocentric. These Marxist views are ethnocentric. They fail to consider ethnicity or ethnic inequality caused by capitalism. So we're having to get a bit creative and argue that really these Marxist views of the family are ethnocentric. They don't consider that actually often capitalism uses racism, or media uses racism to help maintain capitalism as kind of a diversionary tactic. So we're going to go against with functionalism. So functionalist views of the nuclear family. So functionalist views of the nuclear family highlight that Marxism, I'll just try again, it's not quite working. Marxist views of the nuclear family don't consider any functions. Marxist views of the family don't consider any functions. So we're going to do Murdoch, studied 250 families and found that there are 4 universal residual functions. Got economic, education, sexual, reproduction. Going to do Parsons, instrumental and expressive, and the family performs two functions: socialization of children and stabilization of adult personalities. So do those, and I always add in Leach that of the cereal packet family, technically not a functionalist, but cereal packet family, that culturally we push this family as the ideal. Just always add it in, that one. So 3 functionalists. You have to come back to Marxism though. So this shows, you have to use these functionalists to show that what Marxist views of the family neglect. So this shows that Marxist views of the nuclear family, this shows that Marxist views of the nuclear family don't consider that it is a functional system, that ensures individuals' needs are met. We won't go to the society's ones because obviously they think it's maintaining a unfair system, but they don't consider that it's a functional system that ensures individual needs are met, both financial needs and emotional. They don't consider that individual needs are met, both financial and emotional, in the nuclear family, in this structure. They don't consider that it's actually got functional elements to it. However, you've got to evaluate both functionalism and Marxism. So I'm going to go male stream. However, for Heidenson, both functionalist and Marxist views, check the question, of the nuclear family. But however, for Heidenson, both functionalist and Marxist views of the nuclear family maintain patriarchy. Both functionalist and Marxist views of the family maintain patriarchy and neglect to see how women are exploited. So we're going to do Heidenson to criticise them both. So this paragraph, ultimately, it prevents a revolution. It maintains a workforce, prevents a revolution because we're blind to obedience. And ultimately, the family teaches us it's good or the only option. So I am definitely stealing from, again, education there. Okay, so now we're going to do the nuclear family, or Marxist views consider that the nuclear family is a diversionary institution. So we're going to do Benyon. Family acts as a diversionary institution. Family acts as a diversionary institution. I'm going to close my eyes and stick it out. And think about the next insurance premium to be paid. You can add in any more detail. But you've got Hugh Benyon, diversionary institution. This shows Marxist views of the family. This shows Marxist views of the nuclear family. This shows Marxist views of the nuclear family. Consider that the family maintains, and I'm similar to the one before, but the family maintains capitalism because it diverts our attention and distracts us from becoming aware of the exploitation. So this one, I know it's saying the same thing, but we're trying to highlight something slightly different between them. This is saying capitalism is maintained because it produces future workers and we become blind to obedience. And we're socialized that capitalism is good within the family or capitalism is the only option. This maintains capitalism because it diverts our attention and it distracts us from ever becoming aware of the exploitation. So it's saying a similar point that it maintains the system, but in different ways. Okay. However, for Althusser, so again, I'm getting creative, going to pull from education. However, for Althusser, these functionalist views of the family don't consider the education and don't consider the education is an ideological state apparatus. They don't consider that education is an ideological state apparatus. That this is where we are socialized. So these functionalist views of the family don't consider that education is an ideological state apparatus. This is where we are socialized to accept the system, not within the family. So they don't consider that there are other institutions that maintain it rather than the family. Okay, we're going to go against with feminism. So, however, Marxist views of the nuclear family neglect to see female exploitation. So we're going to do Hochschild. Women work a double shift. So it was men's 17 minutes to women's 3 hours. Again, you can have more detail, but I'm giving you the structure. For Edgau, so it's power and decision making. And I'm going to add in any sociologist that mentions domestic violence. You can take Firestone from the second year. It's due to men's size and strength. Due to men's size and strength, they're always a physical threat. So 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence. You could do Messerschmitt. So it's due to being blocked opportunities from hegemonic masculinity, but definitely a domestic violence sociologist. So this shows, come back to the question, Marxist views of the nuclear family. This shows Marxist views of the nuclear family Marxist views of the nuclear family ultimately maintain patriarchy or male dominance. The Marxist views of the nuclear family ultimately maintain patriarchy and male dominance as they don't see the unpaid labour of women, and how the family maintains women's exploitation. So they benefit from it, so they ignore it ultimately, is what I'm kind of inferring there. The reason why I'm going to do a domestic violence sociologist is so that I can argue that these feminist views, along with the Marxists, don't consider LGBTQI areas of family. So, however, for Donovan et al., these feminist views don't consider that domestic violence takes place. These feminist views don't consider that domestic violence takes place in same-sex relationships without men. And both feminists and Marxists' views of the family fail to see or fail to look at the experiences of LGBTQI plus families. Both of them fail to consider or look at the experiences of LGBT, so they're heteronormative, just looking at straight couples or marriages. Right, so we're going to do the last Marxist against here. So, Marxist views of the nuclear family, Marxist views of the nuclear family, Marxist views of the nuclear family. Consider this how power is maintained. So for Engels, the family, the nuclear family, is how the ruling class maintain power. It's how the ruling class maintain power. As wealth is passed down via inheritance. Okay, really short. This shows Marxist views of the nuclear family. This shows Marxist views of the nuclear family. Consider that capital or economic wealth is stored and passed on via the family structure. They consider that capital is stored, so wealth is stored and passed on via the family structure. Passed on, stored by the family structure, and therefore is key in maintaining capitalism. It's the family that's key in maintaining capitalism, because it's how capital or economic wealth is stored and passed down. Again, having to get quite creative. However, so I'm going to steal Snyder from Crime. However, for Snyder, these Marxist views of the nuclear family, fail to see or consider that laws passed reflect the interests. It's the laws that pass that reflect the interests of the ruling class. And therefore, it's legislation rather than family It's legislation rather than family that maintains an exploitative system. It's the legislation rather than the family itself that maintains the exploitation, as this is how wealth is stored, is generated legally. So I'm having to get quite creative with the evaluations, folks, because it's really, really hard to criticise the Marxists because I'm using all of the other theories against here. It's also really hard to try and pull out what's slightly different about each Marxist because what they're saying is really similar. So my last one is postmodernists. However, Marxist views of the nuclear family, and I'm going to come to the second part of the question, which I haven't done yet. Marxist views of the nuclear family are not contemporary or are not applicable to contemporary society. Marxist views of the nuclear family are not relevant to contemporary families. And we're going to do Beck, individualism and choice due to secularization or decline in religion. Going to do Stacey, the roles in the modern family are ambivalent. And Morgan favoured the term families or family practices to recognise all the diversity. I'm going really short just because, again, these are repeated sociologists that I've already gone through. So this shows Marxist views of the nuclear family. This shows Marxist views of the nuclear family are out of date and not relevant, and are not relevant to contemporary family structures. And are not relevant to contemporary family structures, as we now have a variety of family types. As we now have a variety of family types that are not considered or explored by Marxism. However, always do Coast. However, for Coast, the amount of change is being overstated. Amount of change is being overstated. We all live in a nuclear family at some point. So I always use this evaluation, definitely learn this name. And these are really, this is one of the most common grids. And we all live in a nuclear family at some point. For Marxists, this is just adding in a bit more. For Marxists, capitalism is still the economic system. And therefore, for Marxists, capitalism is still the economic system, and therefore, whatever family structure whatever the family structure that's in place, so whatever the family structure that's in place is maintaining the exploitation of the working class. Whatever family structure is if it's not highlighting the capitalism as exploiting you, it's maintaining something that's an unfair system. It's helping to keep the system in place. Okay, so tricky. Okay, conclusion. This shows, to conclude, Marxist views of the nuclear family. To conclude, Marxist views of the nuclear family consider that it teaches blind obedience. It teaches obedience. It teaches us obedience. It's diversionary. It teaches to us obedience. It's diversionary. Often teaches that capitalism is our only option. Often teaches that capitalism was our only option. And it's how the ruling class maintain their wealth, or maintain wealth. Marxists would argue it's not their wealth to have maintained. However, Marxist views of the nuclear family do not see. Where's Larch? I've just remembered I haven't put Larch in there. So I reckon instead of Althazar, sorry folks. However, for Larch, the family is a haven in an otherwise heartless capitalist world. These Marxists don't consider that it is often good for individuals. Sorry, folks, I'm going to steal that. I'm going to put Larch in there. And then, future workers' economic system that exploits. Then we could always use Althazar. Functionalists don't consider this an ideological state. You could use Althazar there instead. Might have to resort to him. Maybe use Althazar there. He's perhaps slightly more relevant because what he's considering is that actually it isn't the family that socializes you, it's education. So their views of where the oppression is taking place is wrong. So we could take that one out. Sorry to do that so late in the game. Just realised I missed out on a strong evaluation. It's, however, Marxist views of the family don't see that exploitation is maintained via other systems like education, media, or legislation, and they are mainstream and often not relevant to contemporary families, and often they don't consider contemporary family structures. So, kind of a bit of a summary. So, Marxist views do consider where the exploitation comes from, but they don't see that it's maintained via other systems, and they often don't consider contemporary family structures. So its usefulness is limited with all the family diversity. That's probably what I'd argue. Okay. And then in the introduction, you outline it. Marxist views of the family, or Marxist views of the nuclear family, consider that the family is a unit of consumption. It often teaches us to be obedient. and it's how wealth is passed. This means it highlights how an exploitative system is maintained. So you're kind of doing the three highlights of the paragraph: the unit of consumption, blind obedience, and how wealth is passed down. And there it highlights how an exploitative system is maintained. However, it neglects to see any functions, the exploitation of women via unpaid labour, and its relevance to a contemporary society is limited when we consider family diversity. So you kind of, in an intro, summarise what the paragraphs will be on for Marxism and the paragraphs against and how we're going to criticise it. So a really tricky one, I have to say, really, really tough. If you do have any questions, as always, do let me know. But yeah, that's my plan of this question.